In today's video, yet another TREB Resale Market Report, this time for the month of October. As always the case, we're going to go through the major key trends, numbers, and things you should know about the Toronto/GTA real estate market, according to the TREB Resale Market Report. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. As always, back with another video for you guys here today. You can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. Of course, my TikTok as well. I'm gonna make an effort to update my Instagram and TikTok as much as possible. That's where I'll post some quick clips of when I go on showings with buyers, so you can see what I'm showing to clients, and background information when I'm working with sellers as well. Lastly, before we get into the point of today's video, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review as well. Your support in that regard is, as always, greatly appreciated. As I always also say, you're not obliged to do so whatsoever. Only subscribe if you wish to do so and want to show your support. Anyways, let's get to the point of today's video, which is the TREB Resale Market Report. As always, the timestamps will be in the comments and in the description. You can feel free to zip around as you please, but as customarily the case, we're going to start with the more major, more macro numbers and trends, and then eventually we're going to get to some more specific numbers by property type and area for condominiums as well towards the end of the video. Let's get started. Starting out with the total number of residential transactions. This is pretty much the category for sales, the number of sales. In the month of October, we saw a total number of 9,783. This represented almost a 7% decrease of the total number of sales year over year, meaning we're comparing it now to October of 2020 as opposed to October of 2021, wherein the number of transactions last year in the same month was above 10,000, 10,500 to be exact. Although this is a decrease in terms of sales from last year, year over year, in terms of month over month, so now comparing October to September, the preceding month, it's actually an increase in the total number of sales. Wherein last month, the total number of sales was still in the 9,000s, but in the lower 9,000s, around 9,100 or 9,050. However, this is a trend that I have been seeing and I have been talking about in these videos, wherein year over year, in September, June, July, transactions have all been down. So although this is an increase from September of 2021 in the total number of sales, September itself, as I covered in the previous report video, September itself was down as compared to September 2020. So September also was down year over year. Same thing with August. August, there was 8,500 transactions. Even August itself was down year over year, where in August of 2020, there was around 10,000 transactions, 10,700. Same thing applies to July, so on and so forth. So the trend here is that year over year in the most recent months, at least as far back as July, transactions have been down on a monthly basis. Part of this is low inventory, of course. Naturally speaking, when there is less inventory available for sale, there will be a dip in transactions. Thus, as a result, this dip in transactions should not be looked at from the demand side of things, more so from the supply side of things. Because if we were to look at it from the demand side of things, a dip in transactions would show us a decrease in demand, but that's not what's occurring. Demand is as high as ever. It's just supply has been diminishing, whereas demand has at best stayed constant, but in certain areas for certain property types increased ever more. June of 2021 was the last month where transactions did not see a dip year over year, where June of 2021 actually had more sales than June of 2020. And as I went through the numbers, once again, since June until this point in time, year over year on a monthly basis, sales are down. This helps us transition into the average selling price, which is probably what most of you guys are interested in. Wherein the average selling price for October of 2021, according to the TREB Resale Market Report, is at 1.155, so $1,155,000. This represents year over year This represents a 19.3% increase, wherein last October, so October of 2020, the average selling price was $968,000. So once again, a 19.3% increase. Now, going from year over year to month over month, looking at September, this average selling price of 1.155 is also an increase from September, wherein in September, the average selling price was 1.136. So an increase on both fronts, year over year and month over month. And of course, I should mention, as many of you probably know, but in case you don't, this represents average sold price across all property types, across all areas. So it's quite a general figure. Not to say that the trend it indicates, as I will go through in depth a little bit more, is not an accurate trend. It's just you have to take it within context, right? This accounts for a condo that's sold in Mississauga and a freehold 2-story detached property that's sold in Midtown, all the way to a semi-detached that's sold in Whitby, right? So it's all property types across all areas. And the reason for the ever so increasing prices, not to sound redundant, it's truly a good explanation, which is once again dwindling supply, and we will get to that actually later on in the video in terms of the inventory. And I will reiterate this later in the video when I go through the number of listings, right? But when demand stays the same or increases and supply decreases, right, that shifts the balance of things towards even more of a seller market, wherein the inventory is scarce but demand is growing, and that causes prices to go up, right? That levels up the floor for prices. And if you recall, in December of 2020, I made a real estate prediction video, a couple of 8 to 10 predictions for the year that has been thus far, 2021. And in that video, I made the prediction that the average selling price across all property types in the year 2021 will have an average above 1 million. Little do I know, I was actually quite conservative. At the time, I thought I was predicting prices to increase far too much. But in effect, I was not liberal enough. I was actually far conservative, because when we look at the prices on a monthly basis, dating all the way back to March of 2021, we see in March, the average selling price was $1,097,000. And then from there, it stayed around $1,090,000 until May, where the average selling price went to above 1.1 at 1.18. But after May, prices dipped until August, where August we saw $1,070,000. Before that, it was $1,068,000 in July. However, into the fall months now, obviously, and some of this is quite seasonal, right? Into the fall months, now we've seen 2 consecutive months where the average selling price has been above 1.1, wherein, as you can see, the previous occasion where the average selling price was above 1.1 was in May once again. And since then, it hasn't crossed over 1.1. Now, 2 consecutive months in a row in the fall months, September and October, where the average selling price has been above 1.1. Now moving on to what I have been referring to, both in terms of the portion of the video where I was discussing the average sold price and the portion of the video wherein I was discussing the number of sales, aka transactions. Now let's get into listings. We truly see here with these listing numbers why prices have increased and transactions have dipped. First and foremost, in October of 2021, according to the TREB Resale Market Report, there was 11,000 listings, so 11,000 properties on the market for sale. Once again, across all areas, but 11,000 in total, to be exact, 11,700. And as you can see, a 34% dip year over year, where in October of 2020, there was around 17,000 properties offered for sale, 17,000 listings. This 34% dip is quite alarming. It should really truly put into perspective, once again, why prices keep going up. There's so much buyer competition, there's so much demand, because the inventory keeps dwindling. And much like I went through the sales, right? The most recent month wherein year over year, the number of listings was actually up, right? So not in this case, right, where it's 34% down, right? Year over year, the number of total listings, total properties offered for sale is down, and is down by a measure of 34%. Not that. The most recent month where it's actually up year over year, and we saw this, was in March. And March, in terms of how much inventory was on the market, was quite hot. There was 15,000 listings in the month of March. And I saw this both in terms of numbers on the screen, but in everyday experience working with sellers. On several occasions in the month of March, we listed properties wherein there was 3 to other 4 listings on the same street. And guess what? There was still at that point in time ample demand to meet the supply that was abundant, and most of the supply at that time was at bidding, right? Trying to induce bidding wars, and a lot of buyers would go to the same street and see all 4 properties, and sometimes, although illegally speaking, you're not technically supposed to do this, submit simultaneous offers on 2 properties on the same street. That's why, on the selling side, you should always have your clauses and conditions to protect yourself from a buyer that's doing that in terms of deposits. Nonetheless, the point here is 15,000 listings in the month of March, quite a bit, and it was up year over year. But since March, listings have been steadily dwindling, right? We'll look at the month after March. April, we had 13,000 listings, still far higher than what we're dealing with October, but a dip from March. After April, what comes next? May, 11,900 for May. June, 11,100. It keeps going down, right? The total number of listings. And once again, to reiterate, all these months, they were down year over year. Into July and August, where July, we were at 9,000 listings. August, we were at 8,000 listings. And now into September and October, the total number of listings have started to recover a bit, but still far, far below the highs of March, April, and even May. Now, once again, some of this is naturally seasonal. In any given year, you're probably going to have less listings, less transactions in the summer months. Most people, they don't really, a lot of people are not so inclined to list their properties in the summer. Not to say it doesn't happen. Of course it happens, right? But some of this is naturally seasonal. But to the effect that it's down 34% and March was such a high in terms of the listings and has been a precipitous decline, that's not totally seasonal. That cannot exclusively be explained with the fact that it's seasonal. All right, now moving into more specific numbers in terms of average selling prices by property type. Now, in terms of detached properties across all areas, which once again we can think of as the GTA, right? The average selling price was at 1.5 million. This represented a 27% increase a year over year. With semis, the average was obviously far less at 1.51, nonetheless still a 24% increase year over year. Moving on to townhomes, here the average selling price was $957,000. Now I'm going to make a prediction and probably won't be controversial whatsoever. It's not going to be a hot take. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think by December, definitely by February of next year, we're going to see the average selling price for townhomes across all areas. So once again, this is the GTA, all areas, be above $1 million. And the condominiums will remain the sole property type, where it's going to remain below $1 million in terms of average selling price. Another key fact here is something I've been indicating in recent videos, is that in my opinion, townhomes are outpacing semis. Not to say they're going to be as expensive as semis, but in terms of rate of growth and rate of appreciation, townhomes across the GTA, but especially in certain municipalities that are further, townhomes are definitely outpacing semis. When we look at condos across all areas, the average selling price is $703,000, a modest 13% increase year over year. And of course, condos in terms of average selling price is always going to be the lowest of this. When we look at the sales figure by property type, so no longer the average asking, or rather average selling price, but now the sales figures, right? Condominiums are the second most transacted property type all over the GTA. And it's natural, there's obviously way more inventory, right? It's easier to build densely vertically than horizontally, right? So you're going to have more inventory in that sense. But in terms of the number of sales for detached, for instance, all over was around 4,200, and condominiums came in second at 2,800 total sales in the month of October. And semis and townhomes were far below that, right? Townhomes came in at 1,600 total sales, and semis came in half of that, 800. So part of this is inventory, right? Of course, once again, there's more condominium inventory available. Naturally, the total number of sales will be bigger, right? When the base pool of given item is higher, the sales figures will tend to be higher as well, because there's just more available, right? There's going to be more transacted more. Plus, the it's the cheapest of all other types of inventory. But part of the explanation is also that, and also this is quite what I'm seeing, right? A lot of buyers are choosing to live in condominiums, go for condominiums, and if they cannot get a detached, they're just going to go for maybe a townhome, but most likely it's going to be a condominium or a detached. A lot of buyers do operate like this. I've worked this year with 2 buyers in particular. We were looking at condominiums for 1.1 and also detached for 1.4. Now, sometimes as a real estate agent, that's a little bit confusing because I would like to know what my buyer wants so I can focus on that property type in a given area and bring them the best results in terms of numbers, trends, and analysis. But it's part of my job, right? If my buyer doesn't know what they exactly want, it's part of my job to deal with that. Point here is though, when there's 4,200 transactions and 2,800 transactions, 4,200 for detached, 2,800 for condos, a lot of people are choosing to forego the middle options. In this case, particularly semis. Townhomes to a lesser extent. There's a lot of demand for townhomes as well. I just said townhomes are starting to outpace semis, and I've been establishing that trend in the 3 previous videos. But once again, this does indicate to us that in terms of demand, there's a lot of demand for detached and condos, more than the other property types. Although once again, townhomes are gaining steam pretty rapidly. Continuing with these property types, breaking it down between the city of Toronto and the rest of the GTA. So you can think of it as the 416 versus the 905. In terms of the total number of sales, in the city of Toronto, sales of all property types were down in terms of pure number of transactions once again, except for condominiums and townhomes. We're in, to go through the numbers once again, in the city of Toronto in terms of the number of detached properties that sold was around 1,000. That represented a 13% decrease. In terms of semi-detached properties, it was at 367. That represented an 11% decrease. But for townhomes, we saw an increase of 5% in total number of sales. Townhomes came around 400 sales in the city of Toronto. And for condos, we saw an increase of 33%, quite an alarming increase in terms of the total number of transactions. But once we look at the 905, the sales of all property types, even including townhomes, has dipped, and condominiums remain the sole property type that actually saw an increase in the number of transactions year over year, where in the month of October, in the 905, condominiums saw a total number of 1,200 sales, which represents an increase of about 20% year over year. Now, this actually helps me segue into the condominium numbers. When we look at the condominium numbers, we see that in the city of Toronto, with certain caveats, but overall, city of Toronto, month over month, prices are down. Yet, in terms of outside of the city of Toronto, particularly in York region, prices are up. Particularly, I saw this both on the ground and in terms of numbers. Where in Richmond Hill, for instance, when I was looking in the market, what's available for both sellers in terms of comparables and both in terms of buyers, in terms of what they might have wanted. When I was looking at a lot of condo listings, I saw a lot of bidding situations, especially in Richmond Hill. As we can see, the GTA at large and the city of Toronto on all fronts. So breaking it down between Toronto, Toronto West, Toronto Central, Toronto East, C1 downtown and C8 downtown, on all fronts, prices are down month over month, with the exception of C8 where it's slightly up in terms of average sold prices. Now, this shouldn't be too worrying for C1 either, because although C1, according to the downtown Toronto market, the prices are down as compared to September, where the average sold price in September was $827, now it's $814,000. That's just the average. In terms of median, the median is actually up, which indicates to me that in the month of October, what happened was a lot of middle tier options sold at a higher frequency, and the higher tier options, so the penthouses that go anywhere from 2 million and above, they did not sell at the same rate. Hence why the average is down, but the median is up month over month. But once we look at York region, for instance, on all 3 fronts, there's 3 major municipalities of York region that have growing and flourishing condominium markets, Richmond Hill, Markham, and Vaughan. On all 3 fronts, prices are up. And for the longest time, I have been talking about Richmond Hill and Vaughan, parts of Vaughan, as very affordable, good options, both for investment purposes and future growth potential and end user purposes, more so with Richmond Hill than Vaughan. But nonetheless, these are municipalities that are outside of the city of Toronto, and the major condominium portions of these municipalities are right beside very family friendly and safe neighborhoods that have a lot of freehold and detached properties. So safe to say, I'm by no means surprised in terms of the growth that we're seeing in terms of prices month over month and year over year for condominiums in York region and particularly Richmond Hill. Anyways, this video has been long enough. I'll have more in-depth condominium numbers towards the end of the week, and more videos on freehold properties and different property types by prices and areas. Thank you very much so for watching. This is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. You can find my contact info in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. Lastly, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Thank you very much so for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.